Every year, teams find they have different offensive strengths. For Auburn, the strength they've rarely been without is running back.
We got a lot of quarterbacks and running backs in here. I don't know if you guys saw it or not, but a couple weeks ago, a national publication chose Auburn as #2 all-time for running backs. And so I thought we'd get a little take on that. Maybe start with Joe Cribbs, who despite sharing a lot of time and a lot of carries with William Andrews and James Brooks, still very high in the record book. Joe, talk a little bit about your career and especially a couple of games when you set the touchdown record at Vanderbilt and then when you and James both went over 1,000 over in Athens that time.
Okay. Well, I tell you, first of all, like I said, I'm really glad to be here because this room is really what Auburn University is about. I mean, the guys in here and the stories that I've heard have really been quite informative to me. Just hearing some of the elder statement give their assessment of their situations. But I kind of remember that touchdown record game. I have to kind of go back a little bit before that because that was my, I believe that was my junior year that happened. And the year before that, my sophomore year, I had a great year. Ended up, I think, setting the record for a sophomore runner at Auburn. I think I broke Cedric McIntyre's record at that time. And so going into my junior year, the expectations were quite high, you know, for me and for a lot of other people. And I remember in training camp, preseason, before the start of the season, I twisted my knee and quite severely. And so I couldn't start that first game. And that first game, James Brooks started in my place, and they played out at Kansas. And I remember I was sitting on the sideline watching him rush for about over 200 yards, and I said, man, I'm not gonna get my job back. so we go on, and I finally get back, get healthy enough the next week to get back in the lineup, and we play some team, and we ended up winning the game, but didn't really do that much. And the following week, we played Miami. And we go out. I think they had O.J. Anderson. They had a good team, and we battled that game pretty good. And during the course of the game, Brooks broke a bone in his foot. So now I get the nod again. So the following week, we opened up here in Nashville against Vandy. And I think the first time I touched the ball, I went for a touchdown. And I think the second time I touched the ball, I went for a touchdown. And then it just felt like I was back in high school. It seemed like every time I'd get the ball, I was running free. We had the old tearaway jerseys back then, you know, so, I mean, I'd get the ball, and the next thing I know, there's no jersey, and I'm headed for the end zone. It was amazing, but I ended up scoring 5 touchdowns that day. The sad thing is that, you know, I think we only won the game by, I mean, it was a close game. So, I mean, we needed those 5 touchdowns. But I think the tradition that we've kind of established at Auburn in terms of the running back is one that I'm very proud of. And, you know, I did see that article, you know, the rankings, and the only thing I would say is that's kind of unusual. I was glad to see us #2. I saw that they also broke down each school in terms of their top 5 runners. And, you know, of course, Bo Jackson was #1 for Auburn, and I was #3. And I found it interesting that Carnell Cadillac Williams was #2. And I started thinking about it, you know, today's athletes have been given so much. You know, they get a lot before they actually earn it. So I said, there's nobody that wants to see Carnell do good this year no more than me. I mean, I want to see him probably be #1 before this year's over. But I just think that rather than giving him #2, let's let him earn it. Let's let him earn it. I mean, because I'd like to stay #2 at least.
For a little while longer.
For a little while longer. What was Henley? You know, Henley was mentioned in the footnote.
listen, let me tell you something. The first time, I was just telling them a minute during the break, the first time I ever saw him run on the field to return a punt in a ball game, they run, and I saw that buttocks up high. I turned to there, I said, this guy is some kind of mover right here. I said, this guy is a running fool, I can tell you. I said,
I can tell you right now, Terry, your status is going down. By the end of the history at Auburn, you won't even be on the list.
You're exactly right, because when I was going to quit, then the next week I go to Clemson and run the second longest run in Auburn history for the line of scrimmage, and now it's not even in the top 15. I mean, it just keeps on moving down. So, but listen, if you got to give up the records like to Joe and Cadillac and Bo,
Well, when I left Auburn, I'm real proud of this. The fact that when I left Auburn, I owned just about every running back record that was there. Some of them didn't stand very long because Brooks broke my career rushing record the very next year, and then Bo came in and kind of rewrote the record books there too. Cadillac just this past year broke my touchdown record, so records are made to be broken. We were talking earlier about games that you want to win and you need to win, and I know for myself, the Alabama game was always like the game. But for me personally, Georgia was a big game for me also because, and I just told Coach Dooley that one of the reasons why I got so up to play Georgia was because they didn't recruit me. I mean, they didn't recruit me. So I had a little bit of extra incentive to go out and try to put some numbers up. And I think statistically, I had my best games probably against the University of Georgia.
That coach that didn't recruit you didn't work anymore for me. But can you imagine in the same backfield, those three guys?
Unbelievable.
I mean, well, y'all saw it. I mean, I experienced it from the other side. Three backs like that had incredibly in one backfield to go on and had the pro career they all had.
Well, I think William actually was injured quite a bit during his college career and really didn't probably put up the numbers that he could have if he stayed healthy a little bit.
Except against Georgia.
Unfortunately for Georgia, the few times that he was healthy was against Georgia. I can remember, I think it was his junior or senior year, and he had about $150 against Georgia, and Brooks and I both were right around 100. I think probably the most memorable game was my senior year when we played in Athens, and I think Brooks had 200 yards rushing, and I had about 170, and I mean we were kind of up and down the field that day.
That defensive coach is not there either, is he?
You both went over 1,000 for the year on that same day.
That's 79.
Well, see, that's what I like to.
Yeah.
And see, that's
You won the
what I
national
like.
championship the next year. Yeah.
I like to refer to that, Joe. See, people say, well, your yards per carry were not that big. I said, well, we played defense back in my era.
From a quarterback's perspective, having those running backs makes our job easy. I mean, I know Randy and Patrick and Jeff and Stan will all agree with me. We've had an opportunity to have some good running backs behind us. And,
I'm interested to see what the quarterback ranking was, like 3.
I don't recall.
We're up there right with USC and all that.
So, somewhere right in there.
Coach, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Coach Stott mentioned the earlier the segment before this one about the tearaway jerseys, and my first year at Auburn, my freshman year at Auburn, I got a chance to see Lionel. That's who I played with in the tearaway jerseys, and I was like. It was the funniest thing happened. I used to always like to stand by Coach down the sideline because some funny things happened by Coach down the side. Just to see what's going to happen next. And I never remember. I can never forget seeing Lionel had his jersey torn off him, and Frank Cox didn't have his jersey on the sideline waiting on him. When he interchanged the jersey, and Coach Dye just went off on him, and Frank just jumped up. I don't know what. Give me your jersey. And Coach was like, get him a jersey. We're gonna get a penalty. And it was just so funny because he had a stack of jerseys. I mean, just throwing them at Lionel because, I mean, every play he was getting torn off of him. And it was just unreal. And you guys played with the tearaways too, right?
Yeah, we did. I tell you, that's the only bad thing about those tearaways. Well, we're probably not cost effective anyway, but you know, you'd have a guy having a good game, he gets the jersey torn, he's got to come out for a play or two, and that, you know, in the course of a game, that might be the deciding factor, you know, with a key player being out.
I went to Coach Jordan one time and told him, I said, I got a great idea. He said, what? I said, I need a tearaway jersey. He said, well, let me tell you something. I got 2 reasons why we're not going to give you a tearaway jersey. He said, Coach Beard says they cost $34, and that's too much to pay for a jersey. The second thing, we don't think you run hard enough to tear out one anyway.
You know, Ben, we talked earlier about this Auburn-Georgia rivalry, and you mentioned Lionel, James, William, all Georgia boys, Jeff, and you, both Georgia boys. Talk a little bit about that rivalry, and Coach Dooley, I'd be interested in yours and Coach Dye's perspective on why the visiting team does so well. I know Auburn has a lot of Georgia guys, and it's highly motivational for them, but why do you think that is?
It really is an unusual series. We always go back to the very first one that took place in Atlanta. In fact, Coach Dye and I was over there for the dedication of that first game, in which Auburn won. At that particular time, the mascot for Georgia was a goat. And after they got beat, they barbecued the goat. That was the end. The goat was no longer the mascot. But it's the oldest continuous rivalry in the Deep South. And it's interesting, I think even Dr. Hurdy at Georgia, and then at Auburn, Dr. Petrie, were in graduate school together, and they both decided at that time that they were going to bring football to their respective schools when they got back. And then they agreed to play each other. So that's kind of the beginning of it. So you can see it had quite an interesting history to start with. And then to have played that long, and then we talked about the Underground Railroad with me going to Georgia and Pat coming to Auburn and Coach Jordan being at Georgia, coming to Auburn. The many players from Georgia that have come to Auburn. We didn't have quite as many from Alabama that came there. But
used to have them, though. Used to have them under Coach Butts. He recruited Alabama pretty hard.
He did?
Yeah.
Well, most of them were from up in
That's right.
Pennsylvania.
Well, but he recruited kids out of North Alabama more so.
Okay.
J.B. Davis and...
Yeah,
I mean,
most of the ones I had were further north.
Well, you got
North Alabama, the coal mines of Pennsylvania.
Well, you had the Swinfords and Kirby Moore.
Yeah, and those were all tough guys. Yeah, early on we did when we first got there. But I don't think they were as sought after players. I mean, they were.
Well, that's right.
We went over there and picked some seconds. It turned out pretty good. Is about what that amounted to. But then to try to explain. The home field disadvantage, because that's kind of what it's been if you look at the history, is hard to explain, other than maybe people just feel comfortable because they're not too far from home. Certainly when you give about 12,000 tickets, you know, you get a good following of people, of supporters that come there. It's not like, you know, you're going off somewhere and that everything there is one side or the other. Both sides have a good following, and there's a lot of intermingling of players from both sides, and it's just been a tremendous rivalry. But I can't explain the home field disadvantage.
I got a theory for it, and you touched on some of it. I don't think Georgia's a bit intimidated coming to Auburn, and I don't think Auburn's a bit intimidated by going to Athens. But I do think it's a disadvantage to be playing at home, that particular ball game, because it's so big. All the home team players, family, high school coaches, high school friends, want tickets to the game. You spend all week long trying to get all your damn kinfolks and all your friends tickets to the game and accommodate it and make all your social arrangements all week long about what's going on before the game, after the game, whatever. And the coaches, that's the biggest game of the year for the prospects. All the high school kids want to come see the Georgia-Auburn game. And you got to, they trying to line up transportation, if that's legal now, whatever they have to do to get them there on Saturday and making arrangements for them and getting tickets for them and set up hostesses for them and make sure that everything is set up just. I think it's a big distraction for the home team. And if I had it to go back over with again, I'd cut the damn thing off on Tuesday, and I said, look, and tell the players and coaches, I said, if you ain't got your recruiting lined up by Tuesday, I said, forget about it. Just let them come some other time or whatever. And the players, the same thing, cut all that communication off on Tuesday. But now that's, that's sitting back and looking at it because it is a disadvantage for the home team. The team that's coming in at a visit, now, like I said, they ain't intimidated. They're sitting over there at their place, relaxed, planning, practicing. You got nobody, all the news media and all the television, see, they come in town about Tuesday or Wednesday and set up and start doing interviews and taking pictures and getting all that excitement coming on. They bringing them damn campers and RVs and all that stuff on campus. And it's just you got a circus atmosphere where the game's being played. Now, if it's like it was last year, you're a lot better, then the best team's going to win. But a lot of times when it's close, the home team don't have the advantage.
Last time y'all beat us in Auburn, we took out the fire hose on you, didn't we?
That wasn't the last time. Hell no. I was in '86.
That was our year, and to get to one thing, Paul, one thing Coach preached to all of us, Jeff and Kurt and Tambo and stuff, was 8-man corner. It's we had Florida State, Georgia, and Alabama, of course, the week in between, and you could tell when you were getting to that Georgia game, and that's when my roommate was Craig Ogletree. Of course, he was from Barnesville, Georgia, and his family starts calling. Right after that game in between the Florida State and Georgia, and say, hey, they're talking over here. And it was just one of those things that the family called the Georgia players, and Jeff, how much it was big to your folks and so forth. And that was the other side of it, as far as your teammate.
And he's going to make damn sure you were ready to play.
Craig Ogletree made sure I was ready to play. Yeah. And, of course, I made sure he was ready to play the last game of the year. And but that was something that, I was fortunate. I came in Auburn at a great time. I was there 86 to 89, and we had a great run. I think Coach Dye put together one of the best coaching staffs. And, our defensive coordinator was Wayne Hall. And, I mean, if you couldn't play for Wayne Hall and get up for Wayne Hall, I know Harry Hill probably has a different story as a defense.
No, by the time y'all got
No, he would.
But we had probably the best defenses, I think, and not to take it with Jackie Burkett, those guys were great. But, when you have a Outland Trophy guy on your front line, Lombardi Trophy guy making plays like Tracy Rocker, I mean, we were a good football team. And so when 8-man corner came around, we were ready to play.
I tell you what, calling that, like Quentin said, being in the huddle and calling the defense and looking at these guys, the Rockers and the Bruces and Benji Rollins and all that, you just get in awe because, hell, I get to the point where I'd start to feel sorry for the offense.
Yeah.
Because we were about to kick their ass.
Yeah.
It was coming.
Yeah.
I mean, Coach Dye.
Tracy tell him that, wouldn't he?
Yes, sir.
Oh, yeah.
He'd open the game and say, well, I'm fixing to kick your ass.
That's right.
Oh,
For the next 60 minutes.
He had Alabama's, what was it, Terrell Trapman, whatever, their offensive tackle shook.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the very first play, and we didn't blitz. We didn't have to blitz.
Our blitz was rushing 5 and playing man free.
Strong 50, go through.
Rush X, cover 8.
Just spread them out, let them go. But
you talking about the Georgia players, and I think one of the things from my perspective, I mean, coming from Georgia, I mean, I was a huge Dog fan. I mean, I think a lot of the guys, from Georgia, a lot of us were huge Georgia fans coming up. I didn't know anything about Auburn. I learned real quick when I got there about Auburn. But being a huge Georgia fan, I gotta tell this story. Well, this came to mind. My first game at Auburn, I was on the sidelines because Auburn really didn't recruit me till really heavily at the end of the season. And I spent my time at Georgia, I spent my time at Clemson, spent my time at Alabama, going on official visits, or going to the ball games on Saturday and then taking my official visits. Then I decided to take one to Auburn when they started recruiting me. But after signing and coming to Auburn, you know, you want to beat Georgia really bad, you know, coming from Georgia. And I get to Auburn and I go through pretty much go through the summer workouts, go through the fall, because I came early. I came right out of high school and went through the summer workouts, and Coach Sullivan was talking about leaving. Hell, I thought about leaving real quick. But after all that, and then I went through the winter workout, and then I went back and had some time off, and I went home. And there's this guy that's just, you know, when I was growing up, he took me to the Georgia games, and me and my brother, we'd go to the games and had a blast, had a lot of fun. And I come home, and I don't know, I think we went to play golf. We went to do something together, and we're in the vehicle, and we're riding down the road. Well, Gerald, you remember Gerald? He come down there, was a big fan after this day, a big Auburn fan. But he throws in, he said, hey, man, I got something I want you to hear. And he throws in Munson, Lindsey Scott, you know, and, you know, I'm sitting there, and I done been through absolutely hell for a year. And I ain't no dog fan anymore. And I'm sitting in the back, and my brother's sitting up front, and he said, what do you think about that? I reached up there, and I punched that thing. I got that tape, and I threw it out the window, and I said, to hell with the damn dogs. I said, I'm an Auburn Tiger. And from this day forward, you better come an Auburn Tiger. I said, or get your ass out of the damn car. And from that point in time, he was one of my biggest.
Bit, Jeff.
He was the biggest Auburn fan from that time on. He said, well, okay, if that's the way you feel about it. But I mean, you know the sacrifices that we all went through.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and laid our guts on the line, and just, you know, you look back and say, my God, did we really do that? Did we really make it through that?
Well, that foundation was laid in 85.
I got to tell a story about Jeff. Now, you know, he was a model off the field. Never got in any trouble. But I guess he's going into his senior year in 87. And, you know, everything rocking along. I found out what plagiarism was. I never heard. They said they got Berger for plagiarism. I said, what in the hell is that? I said, what kind of disease is that?
We didn't go and call.
So we get through the plagiarism, and man, I'm breathing easy. Well, about the middle of the summer. And, you know, the assistant coaches really try to keep that stuff from the head coach if they can, but I don't know, some kind of way it got back to me that Dan Berger done spent the night in jail down there, and he'd been to the Crystal, Berger. But what had happened, they'd been out shining deer, drinking beer, and, you know, I mean, well, what the hell wrong with riding around drinking beer and shining a light of deer at night? Well, they find it and they get out there, and the guy got a pistol laying up on the seat of the truck, and they've been shooting at beer cans or whatever, and I don't know. I mean, they don't look like no big crime to me. And so everybody wants to know what I got to do. So I don't know I forget what I do, but I do some kind of little old something just to let them know that I knew that he'd been out drinking beer. We get into the season. Well, we opened in the season with Texas. Opened a new stadium, skyboxes, national television, the whole thing. Now, he done been through damn plagiarism. He done been to the Crystal, and he done been in jail and all that damn stuff. But I got him. I got him to 2 days, and we get ready to play Texas. So we get down, and everything's going good, and we get down to, it's on Thursday before we're going. So we go to the stadium, and they got on nothing but headgears, no pads, no nothing, just, you know, timing thing, kicking, going through the kick game, and just rehearse. We got a big old dumbass freshman from down there in Auburn, Georgia. Well, he don't know no better. He can, you know, we out there with headgears, no pads. He's full speed, man. He's wound up. He runs back in there and just runs flat over Jeff. Well, you know, you'd have to know Jeff, but he jumps right up off the ground. and hits him right in the damn face mask. You can't even stick your fingers through one of them things, much less get your fist through it. Hits him right in the face with his fist. I said, get him, break him up, break him up, break him up. And the coaches jump in there, you know, and grab him. I can see him right now with a broke hand, you know, from hitting that guy in the face. And we're going back to the dressing room over there across the stadium, and I said, Jeff, he's walking along there with his buddies, and I walk off. So I said, Jeff, I said, come here. And he walks over there, and he got a kind of a worried look on his face. I said, let me tell you something. I said, I've dreamed all my life about having a quarterback that could whip everybody's ass in the huddle with him. I said, I finally got one. I said, but can you imagine what it would have been like, looked like in the headlines of the Birmingham News in the morning? Berger breaks his hand and fight on the practice field, and we fixing to play Texas. And he said, no, Coach, he said, I never thought about it like that. I said, damn it, I said, you have got to, you know, settle down. And I said, we got to make it through this year. Well, he made it for a week or two till he gets, ready to, but I don't know, sometime before homecoming, he, you know, we got an open date, or maybe it's a dove season. He takes him a little trip down to South Alabama on a dove hunt. Somebody from Alabama picks him up in a damn airplane. Yeah. So we had to lay him out again. But I mean, you know, that's part of it. Now all you quarterbacks look around here, y'all laugh. All y'all got a little stuff behind you.
Mine just got printed every week.
Yeah, that's right.
I was a senior. I think we got more quarterbacks in this room than anything.
I was a senior when Jeff came in, and I love his intensity level, and I knew right away he was going to be a great player. And Coach Dye's got that same intensity level. And Harry O reminded me, talking about meetings and things, and I've had a few sideline meetings with Coach Dye in the middle of the games, and he can get pretty excited. We were playing Boston College in the Tangerine Bowl, and we gained about 500 yards on offense that night, but early in the game, it seemed like we could move the ball, and we always had a short yardage play, and Jack Crow, offensive coordinator, would call a double option out of the wishbone instead of a triple option, and I mean, they made me run it every time. And I think twice I had to keep it, and I didn't make the first down, and late in the second quarter, we get down to about the 9-yard line, and it's 3rd and goal, and we call timeout, go to the sideline, and Coach Crow's telling me to run the same play to the left side. And Coach Dye played defense, coached defense, but I always tell people this story that he's a great offensive coach because he recognizes personnel. That's his expertise. So Jack Crow's sitting there telling me to go run the same play, and Coach Dye's screaming at me and screaming at him to give the ball to Bo.
And then you ain't got to be no genius.
Anyway, Coach Crow's looking me in the eye and saying, you go run what I tell you to run. And I get one step around, and Coach Dye is strong, and he's got big hands. I know I'm not the only one in the room that's ever been grabbed by him. But he grabs me by the jersey, and he pulls me up, and he said, I don't give a damn what they do. You pitch it to Bo. So I'm going into the huddle, and I'm like, okay. Coach Crow told me to run. You know, we're a triple option team, and about the only thing I can contribute is making the right decisions. And Coach Dye's already told me what I have to do. So you knew what I was going to do. And sure enough, the defensive end, I took one step, and the defensive end turned his back to me. And I threw it left-handed over his head. And Bo reached back on about the 11-yard line with one hand and caught the ball. He's a great athlete. Catches the ball with one hand, pulls it down about the same time, bam, bam. Guys are hitting him right on the sideline. And he never went out of bounds, and they just fell to the ground, and he scored right there. And I love telling people that Coach Dye is a great offensive coach because he knew what to do with football.
Hey, look, now, the thing, you know, Randy's exactly right, because they've been making him keep it all day long, but the dang end ran upfield. It wasn't no way he could pitch a ball. I don't know how he got it. Well, he pitched it over his head. But Bo ran the last 5 yards out of bounds. He was out of bounds. His feet just stayed in bounds. And, but then I would say, you know, these quarterbacks, every one of them in here, you know, and I don't know, we got, you know, Stan may have more ability than any of them, but every one of them in here made plays when the game was on the line. That's what set them apart. You know, I mean, you can do things out there when you're in the freewheeling zone, and you know, but when you got no time and no downs left, and you can, that's when Randy did his thing, and Jeff, Stan, all of, you know, that's when a quarterback makes his mark right there.
You know, most people say a quarterback has it. You know, they either got it or they don't have it.
Well,
and that's like Pat Sullivan. I mean, he had it. I
Well,
mean, you knew when he stepped in that huddle.
I can't tell you 5 throws that Jeff made in his career, but I remember him hitting Lawyer Tillman against Georgia Tech for the touchdown.
I can tell you one he threw against USC.
I remember him hitting Trey Gaines on 4th down against Alabama. And I remember him hitting Stacey Danley out there in the flat against Syracuse on 4th down out there at the 25-yard line, 30-yard line. I remember Randy hitting Ed West on 4th down against Florida State, and then hitting Lionel in the end zone for the touchdown. Or Reggie Slack hitting Shane Wasden on 4th and 13 for the touchdown to beat Florida.
Patrick Nix hit somebody, didn't he, Coach?
Yeah, against Florida, Frank Sanders.
Frank Sanders.
Yeah. I mean, those plays.
Never forget them.
Separate them.
Frank Sanders in the Alabama game.
Alabama game. Thing I'd say about these young guys,
with
man.
no warm-up.
All these young guys, too, all you young guys, man, you all got those big old rings on, so you did something great right man. We're proud of you. Right. I mean, I looked at all of them. They got big, huge rings on, so you were winning championships and going 11-0 and stuff like that. And that's what we're proud of.
I think most of the quarterbacks in here, and Pat would probably agree, that, you know, we judge ourselves, or I judge myself on Georgia, Alabama, Florida, you know, and LSU when we played them every other year. And, you know, a fond memory for me was actually watching Jeff in Birmingham, and I was probably 13, 14 years old, 86, I guess. Threw for, I think, 81%. Was that right? Is that your completion percentage against Alabama? I probably know and you don't. But that, to me, I remember.
For 2 years?
For 2 years, yeah. And I'm like, God, this guy's money. You know, I said, that's the way a great quarterback for Auburn, to me, judges yourself. I remember more bad plays I made than I do good. But I always wanted to play my best against Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. I never fared too well against Alabama. Now, we won that last one. Thank you very much.
We would have wanted if you'd have been in there. I mean,
but, you know, I think everybody in here, you know, being from Georgia, you know, you play your games at Auburn for Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. You know, there were other big games. Florida State, we won, you know, that last kick and everything, but you know, those you want to be at your best.
Yeah, but you made plays, you know, as a freshman. Now, you didn't have the support around you in 91 and 92. In 90, it wasn't too good. But 91 and 92, you know, you had good people around you in 92, but they were babies. So you were sitting as a junior with freshmen and sophomores playing. And we weren't too far from being a good football team. But but you made the plays the next year. Let me tell you something. And I know he came in and threw the ball to beat Alabama. But I was in football for 40 years. And Vince, how long did you coach and play?
52, maybe.
52? Yeah. Playing and coaching. How many undefeated teams were you on? Playing and coaching.
First one was right over there.
All right, 57.
Right over there.
57.
The national championship
all right,
team.
And that was 80?
80. We had 68 was undefeated. We had a couple of times.
All right, but that ain't undefeated.
Yeah, well, undefeated.
Did you
not undefeated untied?
Okay. Well, that's what I'm talking about. 11-0. When you go 11-0, that's a big deal.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was on one undefeated football team in my whole career and won championships at every level. And you led a football team to 11-0 season.
Absolutely. And the '93 team was special.
Yeah.
Oh, there's no question.
I mean, it really, I mean, it was, and they, I'm going to tell you what, y'all don't, now these guys were part of that. But now they were a special bunch of people. And I could talk about them a long time, and I won't. But see, we started down in 90, and we bottomed out in 91, and we started building it back in 92. But we changed, we didn't change people, we changed our attitude. That's what we changed. And when we did, we got back to being a tough, hard-nosed football team. And they didn't listen. They fight their ass off every week. Now, we didn't win. But we had Alabama running, nothing to nothing, up in Birmingham. And they win the national championship. And, you know, we get beaten a close game with Georgia. We get beaten a close game with Mississippi State. And, you know, so and that team, they were all back. And they were still, a lot of them were juniors. I mean, you know, sophomores and juniors the next year.
Well, they were full-grown men, Coach, because that's when I came in from TCU to coach that year.
Yeah, they were grown men, but they still didn't know how to win. And Stan was growing as a quarterback, and he was maturing.
I remember your first off-season, because I'd gone through shoulder surgery, obviously from the Alabama game, off-season surgery, and going through winter drills, and you daggum had a fire in your eye I'd never seen before. And I guess it's just like you were playing again.
It is hard. Well, it's just like last year in the college football. When all the dust settled, they'd all lost one. And there was 4 great teams out there, but Southern Cal and LSU and whoever else was playing for it, Oklahoma, they'd all lost one.
My son was a redshirt freshman on that team, and he called home and he said, Dad, he said, do you know Coach Crane? I said, well, I know him when he played ball. And he said, you know Coach Hall? I said, yeah, I know Coach Hall well. He said, they're crazy, Dad. He said, I've never seen the kind of things they're putting us through down here. He said, but you know, he said, they believe we're going to win. And he said, and you know, everybody's starting to believe that. And lo and behold, and I still think about, and I know Kurt and Stan can talk about it, but there were a couple of games that year Vanderbilt had us beat.
Toughest game of the year.
Had us beat.
Stopping 4 downs at the one.
At the 1 yard line. I'll never forget that. And that, to me, said so much about leadership. And Stan was, of course, a 4-year starter, but those kids were special.
Well, that's what was taught to us by Reggie Herring, who, you know, that was a life-changing experience to me. Coach Dye hiring him because he was the meanest son of a bitch in America. and
that's where it all started.
He liked to kill us. He liked to have killed. But you know, we just came in and what we learned from that guy and just tried to do the same thing. Wayne Hall was you know, I was pretty blessed to be able to play at Auburn and be able to coach there. And a lot of people don't get to coach where they played and learning from Coach Dye and Reggie and Coach Hall and those people. Because I remember the one thing that stuck with me with Coach Dye, because with us going through 4 days, 2 things really. Number one, Coach Dye was going to make practice more important than the game. And if you have that philosophy as a football coach, then you're going to take care of business on Saturdays. Second thing was going through 4 days with him, and I tell my 14-year-olds all the time about what we did. And he broke us down in those 10 days where, you know, whoever was going to be there was going to be there, and they're going to fight their ass off in the 4th quarter like they did the 1st quarter. And I remember he told us about that 8th day. He said, guys, we ain't doing this just to beat Alabama and just to beat Georgia and just to beat Florida. You don't realize it yet, but we're doing this is when you're out there and you got a wife and you got 3 kids and you got a mortgage, this is going to get your ass out of bed in the morning and go to work.
Yeah. But, you know, he built his team also in winter workouts. And, you know, Tambo, when we get up in January, February, and, you know, we got our stations and, you know, all the linebackers together, all the backs and receivers, and you're talking about tough.
All the trash cans.
When 6 o'clock hit, rock.
They're cold. 6 o'clock and
that
cold.
Horn blew, it was wild. You weren't going to go out drinking that night because you were thinking about them Wednesday.
No,
that's right.
You were trying to survive. You were thinking about just getting through. And I heard him make the statement. Well, somebody asked him about how do you control and this and that, and said, you can control them. And he controlled us by them dang workouts we was going through, because you were absolutely crazy as hell if you went out and tried to do, do something stupid the night before, because...
Well, I guess I'd have been crazy.
you'd have been dead.
But that was the biggest thing.
That was 85.
And that's why I earned the most respect for Coach Dye and his coaching staff, because they worked us, drained every bit of energy out of, got everything that we had physically to give them, mentally and emotionally, and used it to Auburn's advantage. And when it came time for game time, fourth quarter, we were the strongest team out there.
But Harry,
we were in the best of shape.
It shaped us. You think about it. You were always, if you had a weak guy in your group, I mean, you grabbed that guy, or you ran him off.
Let me tell you what I believe about Auburn. And it might have been different when you was there, Jackie and Tommy. But we're in the Southeastern Conference, and it is the strongest football conference in America. And I don't think that we can build our program at Auburn based on beating Georgia and Alabama and LSU and Tennessee and Florida recruiting. We got to build our program at Auburn getting the best that we can get amongst that competition, hoping that we can break even with Alabama and pick up a half a dozen or 4 or 5 out of Georgia that can come to Auburn and play. And we got to win coaching. We got to outwork them. We got to get up earlier. We got to stay up later. We got to be better fundamentally. We got to tackle better. We got to be better in the kicking game. We got to make all the intangibles work in Auburn's favor. And if you do, then you can take a Quentin Riggins that nobody recruited, or Kurt Crane that nobody recruited except Memphis State, or Randy Campbell, and make a quarterback out of it, and surround him with a Bo Jackson or Lawyer Tillman or whoever, and you got 4 or 5 playmakers or 3 or 4 playmakers on offense and 3 or 4 playmakers on defense, and a bunch of guys like you played with in '72 that won't lose, and then you can win at Auburn. But that's the mindset that you got to have. And if we think that we're going to go out here and beat these folks recruiting, listen, they're going to have great players at Georgia every year. When Alabama's got their program in order, they're going to have great players every year. They're going to have them in Baton Rouge, they're going to have them in Knoxville, and they're going to have them in Gainesville. And we're going to have our share in Auburn, but we ain't going to beat them recruiting. But we can get enough good players at Auburn that if we do the best job while they're there and get the most out of them, then we can win. And that's the mindset that I had, and that's what we did. And you guys that are here, y'all are the product of that philosophy while I was there.
Pat, you made reference to the time when I was at Auburn, which is the same time that Tommy and Ken Rice, and of course you were at Georgia at that time, and the same philosophy was there. You look at our team that we were playing with in the national championship year in 1957, and how many highly recruited players did we have? We had Tommy Lorino, and he was highly recruited. We probably had Bobby Hoppe was probably highly recruited. But you start going down that line, and you're going to find the Zeke Smith, and you're going to find the Jackie Burkett, and you're going to find a bunch of guys who were not highly recruited. As a matter of fact, I think we surprised everybody.
A good example is Lloyd Nix as your quarterback.
Exactly.
I mean, Lloyd Nix was a defensive back in spring practice.
Well, how could you be any different than Randy Campbell?
Well, that's what I'm saying. He was
Randy Campbell and Randy.
Randy was a fifth string split in
Lloyd and Randy were a lot alike. Talent-wise, and
if I had to pitch that ball to Bo, I'd have been fifth string again.
Well, we had a Tommy Lorino to pitch to too, though, and he was pretty good. Although he wasn't anything as big as Bo, but he could run. Believe me, that little bandy-legged guy could run.
But you know that why was Lloyd Nix the quarterback?
Because he was the most dependable guy on the team.
Well, the other quarterback.
Our quarterback got kicked out of school.
Well, I didn't want to get into that.
Well, if you look and from Randy and then me after Randy and so forth and look at the quarterbacks that are in this room today, you know, one thing that I learned, and Randy took me under his wing early on. He and I, we got along real well and we're friends. And you know, Randy coached me and showed me how to be a leader. I saw a guy that had minimal amounts of talent that was a general on the field. It was incredible. His leadership skills were second to nobody's. And you know, 11-1, you know, you're talking about an incredible season. And like Coach Dye says, you take a guy that can make the right decisions, that won't break under pressure, then you got something special. You can surround him with athletes, and that's exactly what was happening. Randy had a lot to do with me being able to come to Auburn, because really I don't think Coach Dye and Auburn staff was sold on me talent-wise. Georgia was recruiting me, and Alabama and Clemson and some other schools were recruiting me, and that was one of the reasons why I didn't ever go to a Georgia or an Auburn game, come down for a visit during the year. But I think they actually realized that we got a winner here. And the thing that I was doing in high school, I wasn't a blue chipper by no means, but we were winning. And we were winning every Friday night. And then, you know, and Randy taught me that one of the most important things you could do is gain the confidence of your peers. You know, I had my style of doing it, which wasn't necessarily the right way, but it worked.
That gun was in your seat about?
Well, that gun actually wasn't mine, but I mean, you know, it's amazing.
Randy made a throw against Alabama in '82 that Peyton Manning would have been a great throw for him.
Yeah.
To Mike Edwards on 3rd and 15. It was a 16-yard pass. Kept the drive alive that, you know, when we went on and kicked field goal.
I'm going to give you a little quarterback story. You know, when Thomas and Lee up here and being in a huddle with Randy Walls. Now, mind you, Pat Sullivan has left. We've gone through spring training all with David Lyons. They'd moved him from secondary, where he had played quarterback in high school and won all these ball games, because a terrific athlete. Went through spring training, and the last day of spring training tears up his knee. They just throw Randy Walls in during two-a-day and say, Coach Sheridan said, we're going to go with him. You're going to put the bell cowl around him and let him go. And so this guy literally, now for all of you that weren't in that dressing room and went out to the first opening warm-up game in Jackson, Mississippi, to see this man walk out on the field with his jersey on backwards. I mean, so help me goodness, the guy was so nervous he had his jersey on backwards during this, and would call wrong formations and just everything. Well, we win the first ball game 14-3. And like I said, the next weekend we come back, and now Randy completes 2 passes in that ball game. He completes 2 passes. I think one to Thomas, where you caught both of them. And that's all he threw. You know, well, no, he threw 5. He completed 3, 2 out of 3. And so then we play Chattanooga, and I think he completes 1 in the Chattanooga game. And so we beat them 14-7. Then we play Tennessee, and we're 27-point underdog to them, and we go to Legion Field, and he completes 3 passes the next weekend. So he's completed 6 passes, but we beat Tennessee. We beat them 10-9. And just up and down the field, we just wore them out. But the next week, now this guy, the first game, come out on the field with his jersey on backwards. The 4th ball game against Ole Miss, he comes out with this wristband with all these plays all over it. And now he's walking out there taking these snaps from center, and he's cocky, you know. And I said, what are you doing with that wristband? We don't have that many plays. He said, you know that, but they don't know that. I mean, the guy completed 6 passes in 3 ball games, but he was a winner. You put him along with Johnny Simmons and the Thomases and things like that that were good players, and he was a winner.
Coach, I remember a throw Randy made in the '82 game on the drive before Bo went over the top.
That's what I was talking about.
Well, the play that they interfered with our receiver, and you were on the numbers yelling at the referee before the guy ever broke the pass up.
It took a lot of guts for that guy to make that call.
Billy Tees.
Yeah.
I know who made the call.
Joe Delaney didn't have guts enough to make it. It happened. It should have been. It was Joe's call. Both of them played at Georgia Tech, and Billy had guts enough to make the call.
I just remember everybody dragging you back.
I remember what Coach Bryant said walking off the field. We walked right by the officials.
This is live now, Coach.
I won't say what he said, but he said, one of the officials, he said, I'm going to throw this on today, and just kept right on walking. Oh, me.
Well, Coach, that the philosophy that you had and that you instilled when you started there in '81, there was a lot of us that bought into it, and not bought into it as a sales pitch, but bought into it as a new way of life. And it was something that a lot of us believed in anyway, but never heard it articulated and laid out for us. And the thing was, Coach Dye lived it. When he talks about outworking people, out hustling people, using all the intangibles, that's what he does. And to see that inspired us, you know, and we thrived on working harder. And we thrived on out-hitting people. And it was something that we put in a foundation doing. So, you know, I came from Miami where I didn't hear a lot about Auburn football. And my main allegiance when I got up there was when I first heard Coach Dye in his first meetings. It was, he was preaching to the choir. And, you know, the whole Auburn family grows on you where you love it, but I was just feel so fortunate that I could play for Coach Dye.
Well, I think you said it right there, family. You know, how many times did Coach Dye talk about family? We're the Auburn family, the whole spectrum of Auburn family, our football team. And, you know, we bought into it, and we're still buying into it. You know, family is so important to me and the values I'm trying to lead and be a father and be a husband and be a good family man because, I mean, a lot of these guys, man, I ain't seen in I don't know how long, but we'll always be family. The people in this room will always be family because we all have one thing that's brought us together, and that's Auburn. And you know, that's powerful.
There's four things, I think, that I can remember my 4 years at Auburn playing for Coach Dye, and things that I try to instill in my children. But first and foremost, you set goals for yourself, team goals, individual goals, and personal goals. And that first goal better be beat Alabama, you know, which we all know that. But then you pay attention to detail. You take care of the little things because those are the things that are going to get you beat.
You call it the basics.
The basics. Then preparation and being prepared because you never know when opportunity will present itself.
Yep.
And if you're prepared, you can take advantage of it. But the most important thing I think I remember is when we would play a big game, Alabama, Georgia, and Coach Dye would get to the end of his talk, and he had a talk that it was the same just about every week, but he'd tweak it a little bit. And at the end of it was when I was always inspired the most. He'd put that little personal touch on it about who we were playing. And it was, he would talk about, all right, we've got average players in this room, and they're going to have to play good. We've got good players in this room, and they're going to have to play great. And we've got great players in this room, they're going to have to do something special. And it just made you think about where you were in that echelon, where you were as a member of that team, what you're going to have to do to reach inside and do a little more than what you thought you could do. And I think it's the same way in life. And if we can all learn and do that, then I think we'll be a success.
I know. I worked really hard. Coach Hall, you know, he was like a father to me, Coach Dye and those guys, and I worked really hard not to disappoint him. I mean, I used to be playing on a game thinking, oh man, I didn't run hard enough. And knowing that I was going to be on film, and the disappointment was going to come by, you know, you're getting a good cussing out, get the whistle, Coach Hall's whistle, you know, but that instilled me, you know, to work even harder and to do the very best I could, draining all the ability out of me to satisfy them, because it was always a disappointment to see the disappointment on their face when we didn't do the right thing, because we were properly coached, you know, we were in shape and everything. But I guarantee you, by the time when I left Auburn and went into the league, I would always hear coaches say, that's an Auburn player. You ain't got to worry about him. He's well taught, well coached. All you got to do is just tell him, give him the X's and O's. That was, for years on, when Coach Ty was there, that's all you would hear. In the NFL, CFL, everywhere, the Auburn player always stood out as being taken care of, that he knew he knew the right thing to do. He was going to give you everything. He was going to work hard. All those things. And it carries on to, like you guys say, to our families.
Well, it's perfect, you know, and listening to Mark and Kurt and you, Harry-O, and Ben especially. And, you know, coached us not for, you know, the game, you know, 8-man quarter, but he coached us for life. And you think about, you know, when we had to do our interviews, we had to be clean shaved. We had to wear collared shirts. And you think, no hats. And you think about the meetings. If the meeting started at 6 o'clock, you had to be in there before he hit the door, or you're late. So to this day, if work starts at 8 o'clock, I'm at the office at 7:45 or 7:30 because of what I was taught in those meetings and stuff like that. And so a lot of people maybe miss what football is all about. It's not necessarily about, winning on the field, but it's also about winning off the field. And I think we got a lot of that. Although we had Reggie Herring as our linebacker coach.
There's no doubt that, coaches like Pat Dye and Vince Dooley and some of the other coaches that, you can, Suge Jordan that I played under, they were very instrumental in your role of life that you took. I mean, the points and the way they led you and the things they taught you. But I think my inspiration came from my assistant coach, Paul Davis. And we all had great coaches, position coaches. But, I couldn't leave here today without speaking a little bit about Coach Davis and what he meant to me, instilling in me, as Harry O say, the want to, not disappointing, I was a walk-on at Auburn. Thomas was too. And to do that and then to be in the SEC as a walk-on, you had to have someone to believe in you. But you had to, you had to do something for them to make them believe in you. But being the kind of person that we were on defense, and I'm speaking, like I'm sitting here with people like Kurt Crane, Mike Cullen, so many more others that have contributed so much more than I at Auburn, and feeling so humble to be here. But and they too having great position coaches. But Paul Davis was an instrumental coach to me. He believed in me, therefore I believed in myself, and was able to achieve, feel like a fairly successful college career. Didn't go on to pros, but I can look back and as I say, I think I left it on the field most of the time.
Paul had an impact on me too. My freshman year, we were playing at Florida, and he was kind of the semi-kicking coach that year, I guess. And early in the game, we had a 52-yard field goal, and I went out there, kicked it, I hooked it to the left and missed it. So the next quarter comes up, and it's the next opportunity we had, and they yelled field goal. So I go running out on the field, and he yells, "Ow!" And I look back, he goes, "Get your ass over here." And I came back, and he grabbed my face mask. He said, "If you hook this, I'm going to kick your ass." And I went out and made the kick. And but just little things like that. He was just a good coach to be around that first year. And somebody that you guys are all talking about, these crazy coaches, nobody's mentioning Coach Casey. That first practice when he headbutted Sam DeJarnette and didn't stitch his head up till practice was over 3 hours later.
I don't know which was more crazier, him doing that or Coach Hall when he jumped off the goalpost before the Alabama game. Remember that? At the in the calisthenics, we all do the cheer, and he jumped from the goalpost and landed and broke his ankle.
I always remember Coach Jordan always had one little sentence. He'd do his little spiel, and then he'd take that left hand and he'd pound it into his right hand, and he'd say, "Damn it, we're just not gonna have it any other way." And that was our thing, man. When he said that, we're just not gonna have it any other way.
He said that so many, just about every speech he ended that same way.
You got to tell him about Higdon and Coach Jordan, Paul.
Thomas, this is a great story right here.
This guy, he was a quarterback, but he was a real pretty boy. He had jet black hair, and he
Looked
had
like
his
Warren
white
Beatty.
shoes. He wore a long mink coat to class. He was Joe Namath and Higdon.
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
And they moved him to wide receiver. And so he was out running a long pattern one day, and Coach Jordan had gotten older. And Coach Jordan was standing on the field. Kenny was out there, and he was looking back at the ball, and Coach Jordan was waving, no, and he just ran right over Coach Jordan, man. I mean, Coach Jordan's leg went up in the air and everything, and everybody was all concerned. And I think Coach Higdon was laying there on the ground. And he said, Kenny came down there, and they got Coach Jordan, and they ran over Higdon with the golf cart. And Coach Jordan said, well, I just wish it had been somebody a little better than Higdon. That's right.
I remember they moved Higdon to wide receiver, and he said, who's ever heard of Joe Namath playing wide receiver?
Let me tell you one quick story, guys. This is a true story. I was in Los Angeles this spring, and I went to an audition, and I was sitting out there by myself, and this young guy comes, he's about 25, and he had his shirt open, and I could see his T-shirt, and had something about Bo and had something about Van Tiffin on it. And I said, well, what does your T-shirt say? And so he opens it up, and it said, happy birthday, Bo, Van Tiffin, the date of that game, and the score. And I said, oh, wow, man, did you go to Alabama? He said, no, it's just one of those vintage things that you buy, and you just wear them. So I said, well, you don't know what it means? He said, no. I said, well, let me tell you. I said, the Bo is Bo Jackson. He said, oh, Bo Jackson? I said, yeah, man. I said, this guy, Van Tiffin, for Alabama, he kicked this field goal at the end of the game. They won the game and everything. So he says, well, did Bo go to Alabama? I said, no, man. Bo went to Auburn and stuff. So we kept going, and I said, you know, man, he said, they take that stuff real serious down there, don't you? I said, oh, man, you go in the wrong place with that T-shirt on, you'd be in trouble like hell. So he looks at me and he said, well, how do you know so much about it? And I said, well, I play football at Auburn. So we made eye contact. I said, yeah, you're getting ready to get your ass kicked.
We have reached the end of the third quarter. We're going to talk about memorable games and other memories when we come back. But it's time for a break. Thanks.
Wow. Great stories of those who played the running back and quarterback positions. Coming up, hear the Auburn legends talk about some of their favorite games.